this goes into a little more detail of the kind of information we were looking at. So you can imagine that we've had all of these COPs, we've had a lot of monitoring data. So this is sort of a summary of what we had and nil under the compliance. But, you know, I kept saying to the secretary, well, we got to have more. So one thing we did is after our first meeting, we sent out another plea to countries. Could you please send in your national reports? So the COP had extended the deadline at the last COP. We hadn't received too many. So my vice chair and I sent out a letter on behalf of the committee. And we actually got, I think it was about 10 more. So that was useful, because the thing is, you don't want to come to, you know, unsupportable or incorrect conclusions because you don't have the right data. So one thing we did do is we went to the national implementation plans. So Stockholm, apart from Article 15, where you have to report on what you've done to implement the treaty, Article 7 has requirements to develop a plan for how you're going to implement the treaty. And there's been a lot of funding given by the Global Environment Facility for these NIPs, as they're called. And those are only plans about what you're going to do. But what I said to the secretary is, I think there's information in there, at least on, I mean, certainly how we did ours, what legislation you're using to implement the treaty, what regulations you're using, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a certain amount of information. It was still just a plan, but at least there was a certain amount of information that we could, as we said, mine out of there. There were COP decisions, you know, for many years dealing with all these issues, right? And so I was always big on, we have to do something value added here. I don't want to just repeat what's been said at every conference of the parties, you know, and just gather them all in one place. I wanted some value added, but we still had to be very aware of what the COP had said about each and every one of these issues over the last, since 2004. And we also had to take into account, or wanted to, reports from expert and other groups. So we had a lot of reports that had come in at previous COPs, but we had a few things going on in parallel. There was a review of the financial mechanism going on in parallel with our work. And so their conclusions weren't ready when we were finalizing ours, but we knew enough to know that we weren't going to contradict. There was also a synergies review. So Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention have integrated their secretariat, and we try to work on a cooperative basis on program items such as waste between the treaties. And so there was a review of the synergies process, which we felt was important to see, well, have synergies helped the Stockholm Convention? Have they hurt the Stockholm Convention? And that was being done in parallel too. So the Secretariat was able to show the committee where those recommendations were going, so we could make sure that we were somewhat in step. So anyway, there was a lot of other information we were able to look at, which was good, because we didn't have necessarily from the sources we were expecting.